I have not lost. How do I accept it when I have not lost?
Michael Sata was sworn in early this evening, with his main opponent, outgoing President Rupia Banda, conceding defeat. Banda has asked Zambians to support the new president, saying he had done the best for Zambia and that it was time for a new leadership to take over.
It is not for us to deny the Zambian people. We never rigged, we never cheated, we never knowingly abused state funds. We simply did what we thought was best for Zambia. I hope the next government will act likewise in years to come.
Sata becomes the new president of Africa's largest copper-producing country. President-elect Sata has strong backing in urban areas and in the country's economic center in the Copper Belt. Analysts say younger voters helped propel him to victory, with the youth using the ballot box to bring about change. Sata garnered 1.15 million votes against incumbent Rupia Banda's 961,796, an election contested by many minor parties. Foreign observers have generally praised the election as free and fair. Sata, the leader of the Patriotic Front Party, lost the last election in 2008 by just 35,000 votes in a 2008 presidential runoff triggered by the death in office of Levi Mwanawasa.
Being the returning officer for the election to the office of the President, do hereby declare that I have, in accordance with the law, ascertained the results of such an election, and I therefore declare Michael Chirufya Sata to be duly elected as President of the Republic of Zambia this 23rd day of September 2011.
For our party now, it's hard work. There's a lot of damage that has been done to this country by MMD. So it's not a celebration. It must be hard work now for my party and my president to rectify all the problems which we have got.
We were very happy because we wanted change and we finally have it.
There's no fighting because justice has been brought. We are happy because Zambia, Michael Chirufya Sata, he's our president and we're very happy.
I got my vote, it was just going vain. We have won! We have won! I haven't eaten for 3 days. I haven't slept for 3 days.
Let's go! Let's go, Sata! Let's go!
In 2012, the Sata administration launched a probe into all foreign deals signed under the previous government. It alleged many of them were illegal and that the state assets had been sold at a fraction of their value. The outcomes was that the state reversed the sale of the national telecoms company Zamtel, which had been sold at 75% to Libya's LAP network. The deal was worth more than $200 million and was found to be illegal. A similar probe was conducted into the sale of Zambia's national commercial bank to Netherlands lender Rabobank. The state also temporarily halted mining activity, which accounts for more than 80% of the country's export earnings. It targeted foreign investors, particularly Chinese-owned companies. All exports were put on hold during investigations into awarding of mining concessions. Soon after this, the government doubled its taxation on foreign-owned mines. Sata defended the 6% royalties the state claimed, alleging Zambia's previous tax structure was overly favorable to foreign investors. However, Zambia's most notable economic achievement under Sata's leadership was the raising of 2 euro bonds. In October 2012, the country raised $750 million and another $1 billion for infrastructure development programs in April this year. There were other positives. Under SATA, foreign direct investment climbed above $3 billion. GDP rose to 7.3%, inflation eased, and unemployment levels dropped. Yet it's unclear if these gains can be sustained, as Zambia is still dependent on copper prices, which form the backbone of the economy.
A populist leader, and a provocative one at times.
You have got your registered voters. When they bring money, get it.
Known as King Cobra, Michael Sata has had a long history in politics, but he started off as a railway platform cleaner in London. His rise is a story that inspires, but at the same time, it's not without controversy.
There's going to be lots of provocation, but those it's because of poverty.
This is the Sata many in Zambia came to love 3 years ago during presidential campaigning. For 10 years, he'd been an opposition leader. But his focus on lowered taxes, clean water, and better living standards for the poor earned him a huge following. And that eventually landed him the presidency. Sata's time in office, though, has been criticized. Many accused his government of cracking down on opposition, on dissent, and on journalists. Widespread corruption is another worry. But his health soon seemed to overshadow those concerns.
We are very grateful to Chinese people because before I joined politics, the Chinese people did a great deal in our country when he built Chinese land.
This was Sata in June. The contrast between the vigorous opposition leader and the frail president could not be more pronounced, and it fueled speculation that Sata was gravely ill, rumors government took pains to deny. He was 77 when he died.
Massive infrastructure development will continue, and the mandate that was given in 2011 is not wasted, so that these programs that were started by President Michael Sata do not suffer discontinuation. We have to deal with some issues like the issue of the constitution. I think it's been on the minds of our people of Zambia. We have to attend to that.
Edgar Chagwa Lungu was born in 1956.
And so begins Lungu's term, albeit a short one. With 18 months before the next election, Lungu doesn't have a lot of time to deliver on a raft of promises he's made to the country's 14 million people, most of whom are workers and the poor.
As I stand before you today, as the 60th President of the Great Republic of Zambia, I am overwhelmed with gratitude, and I feel greatly humbled that you have decided to make me your servant.
Zambia's President Edgar Lungu has rejected accusations against him for oppressing the opposition leaders, claiming that government authorities were within the law denying the opposition permits to assemble with their supporters. Lungu is said to be cracking down on dissident and seeking to consolidate power ahead of elections in 2021. There is nothing to stop you from holding public meetings if you feel like it. But speaking for myself, I'd rather focus on serious issues, as opposed to galvanizing political support from 2016 to 2021. Police have been dispersing gatherings by opposition leaders, and last week they fired tear gas when Harry Kalaba addressed his supporters in Luapula province. Lungu won the presidency rightly in 2016, but the polls were marked by clashes between his PF party supporters and those of the rival United Party for National Development. The president successfully asked the Constitutional Court to allow him to run again for a third term, breaching the two-term limit, further increasing political tension in the country.
You have selected industrialization and creation of employment. I can tell you, we can trust this government. We can trust the government of President Lungu. We mean well, you can trust us, and we will never disappoint.
Its leader wasn't there to hear the final numbers, the fifth time he's lost a presidential race.
We brought to the attention of the Electoral Commission where vote ballot papers have been stuffed.
We are aware of officials of PF who are holding on to ballot boxes. That matter has been brought to the Electoral Commission. They have ignored us with impunity.
The European Union observer team agreed with his claims that the incumbent unfairly used state resources during campaigning and that he used the police against UPND gatherings. Like here at their final rally when police fired tear gas.
Security in the capital is tight, especially near the results centre, because last year opposition supporters stormed it, but this year it's followers of the governing Patriotic Front who are here joining in the party, although their man only narrowly managed to win in the first round.
It was filled to capacity with an excited crowd. Half a dozen government leaders and presidents were there from across the continent. Edgar Lungu, who narrowly won the presidency, faces an uphill battle to fix Zambia's struggling economy and improve the lives of its poor.
On my part, I have learned that there's no time and latitude to settle scores. We have got work to do. Let us seize the opportunity to rise above the different points of view that divided us during the campaigns.
He beat his main opposition by only 100,000 votes, but Hakainde Hichilema says the election was riddled with fraud. His efforts to block the inauguration and have the results annulled were rejected by the country's highest court. He says that's a clear case of the government manipulating the judiciary.
This inauguration is illegal, is unconstitutional. He never won the election. We believe we won the election, but our petition was never heard. So there's a crisis, a constitutional crisis.
But the chances of Zambians hearing dissenting voices like Hichilema's have been greatly reduced after authorities recently closed down several independent media outlets.
President Lungu's biggest challenges will be uniting the country and improving the economy. Growth has slowed, unemployment and inflation are rising. That makes life harder for millions of Zambians who are already struggling to survive below the poverty line.
Political analyst Alex Mwamba Ngoma says Lungu can bring people together.
There are people, especially from the opposition, who do not seem to be very happy with what has happened. They don't have to like each other. Lungu has to reach out to them, keep an open door policy, allow them to keep coming to State House so that they can discuss the issues as they way forward.
It's something all these people and millions more beyond the stadium are depending on. Tanya Page, Al Jazeera, Lusaka, Zambia.
Joined by Ronak Gopaldus. He is the country risk analyst at RMB. Ronak, thanks so much for joining us. Zambia, it's been in the headlines for quite a number of reasons. Just give us a sense of the economic plays and the dynamics. What's currently going on there?
Well, you just need to look at the financial markets this week to get a sense of what's going on. The kwacha took an absolute beating, losing 17% of its value in just a day. It's the world's worst performing currency. It's lost 80% of its value this year. So really some serious issues on the financial market front. But I think this is a broader problem, as the country is really experiencing somewhat of a perfect storm. On the external front, the fall in the copper price was a significant factor on account of fears about a China hard landing. There's emerging market risk aversion, which is also feeding into the currency. And domestically, the country's battling, fiscal pressures, as well as an election year next year, plus the power crisis. So a lot of negative headwinds for the country to contend with at the moment.
In terms of the fiscal pressures, I mean, copper being one of their biggest exports, I think about 70% or so. What is the outlook for Zambia in terms of keeping those fiscal balances in check?
Well, it's going to be very difficult, and the budget next week is going to give us a clear indication of what stance the government is actually going to take towards austerity, or will there be slippage. I think these sectors under tremendous strain. This week alone, last week we saw Glencore's results, which had an impact on copper prices, which are at their lowest levels in 6 years. In addition to that, with the power constraints, the mines can't produce, so you're getting a double whammy really on the mining sector from a price and a production perspective. Throw into the mix the regulatory uncertainty that's existed on account of the VAT non-payments, as well as the royalty regime. and really a lot of moving parts over here. Already we've seen...
Back in terms of those, the regulatory environment in the mining sector. I know you were in Zambia a couple of weeks ago, so you're also able to give us perspective of what it was like on the ground.
So, I mean, the big sticking point has been that there was a proposal to increase the royalty taxes for mines on open cast minings, and there was a lot of to and fro between government and the sector. Obviously, with the plunge in commodity prices now, it's been very difficult because the mines are already cash strapped. So ultimately, the government backtracked following the election of President Lungu in the by-election earlier this year. But a number of challenges for the sector in general. Already, we've seen job losses in 3 mines, and really, what this comes down to is government revenues as well as jobs, which it's a very difficult balancing act for both the mining sector as well as the authorities.
The currency play, I mean, the Zambian kwacha has been in the headlines. Whether or not we're going to see some, forex exchange intervention coming through this, it's been said we won't see anything like that. I don't know, what's your sense? I mean, what's the consensus or what may happen with this currency?
Well, the Ministry of Finance came out today and said that it's a free-floating currency. They're not going to intervene given the fact that the level of import cover and foreign exchange reserves is very thin. Ultimately, all eyes are on the budget next week. The monetary policy alone can't do the heavy lifting, so really there needs to be strong fiscal consolidation, and that's why we're watching what the ministry has to say next week. But generally, I think overall, the economy is under siege. Consumers are under pressure from the exchange rate, from the inflation front. Power is making it very difficult for businesses to operate in the country as well. And generally, the copper price is the single biggest determinant of the country's health. Now, you fast forward a year, there's another election next year, and...
Mary supports her 4 children by renting out rooms, but it's getting harder and harder to make ends meet. Sometimes she can only afford half the fare for her son's school transport, so he has to walk home. The single mother also says feeding her family is more difficult than ever because of the rising cost of living.
After we collect rent, we budget for food. Instead of buying a big bag of sugar like a year ago, we can only afford small ones. Nowadays at some meals, there's only food for the youngest children. And whereas last year we used to eat chicken, now we only have beans and soya mince.
Maize is a staple food. Mary says the price of a 25 kg bag has doubled in the past year. Every household in Zambia is feeling the effects of inflation.
As a major copper exporter, Zambia's economy has been hit hard by the global fall in commodity prices. Inflation and unemployment are on the rise while its currency has taken a dive. That's all been compounded by a regional drought that's led to food shortages and power cuts because the hydroelectric dam levels are low.
It's a potentially disastrous combination for a country that's already poor and an enormous challenge for the newly inaugurated president, Edgar Lungu. Some economists say he must negotiate better deals with foreign-owned mining companies so that Zambians enjoy more benefit from their natural resources.
We have to have these mining companies account for the production that they're doing in this economy. We should be able to convince them that it is in everybody's best interests for export earnings to actually come back into the economy.
Power cuts are the biggest obstacle for many business owners. Elias Venture's bakery supplies cakes and other sweet treats to major supermarkets nationwide.
Unfortunately, we've had to scale down, especially on the staff. So obviously we can't support more people because of reduced incomes.
The problems Zambians are facing are mirrored in other countries across the African continent, also dependent on commodities, where businesses and families with few choices are having their spending squeezed and hopes for the future threatened. Tanya Page, Al Jazeera, Lusaka, Zambia.
But people's salaries stay the same. Like many Zambians, she's had to cut back on luxuries for herself and her son.
I definitely don't go in big shops and buy expensive brands anymore because you definitely have to look at the price difference and what you can afford. Me growing up and him growing up, we had more activities, but now it's like really expensive to plan out like the weekends and where to take him and whatnot, because what was cheaper for me when I was younger is expensive for him now.
Unemployment hit a 10-year high last year. The local currency, the kwacha, keeps losing its value. Zambia has more than $12 billion of external debt, as well as an unknown amount of debt to China. And last year it became the first African state to default on its debt during the COVID-19 pandemic. The presidential candidates are trying to convince voters they have what it takes to turn around the economy. The incumbent, President Edgar Lungu, is campaigning on development projects built by his government and paid for by debt. Speaking to his supporters, he condemned the recent election violence that saw him order the deployment of the military.
What we have seen happening in the last few days of killing people, hacking them like animals, cannot be allowed to continue. Countries which are broken and failed states start like that. The politically motivated murders we have seen recently must be condemned to the stronger extent, and all culprits must be booked and punished.
Lungu is promising more development if he is re-elected, but some economists warn against adding to Zambia's debt load.
That the infrastructure development that you actually put must also be spread between social and productive, so that the productive one is able to give you a return, even though the social one is not giving you the immediate return. And this we didn't do. All the infrastructure that we have done does not seem to be generating the revenue that is required to meet the repayment. And that has been where the shortcoming has been.
Candidate Hakainde Hichilema is promising to create jobs for Zambia's jobless youth. Unemployment hit a 10-year high last year. There's been anger and frustration about the economy. That's why supporters of Hichilema's opposition, United Party for National Development, are confident he can beat incumbent President Edgar Lungu.
So he is scared of President Hakainde Hichilema because sanity is going to return this country. These guys, they have committed so many offenses. There are too much fraud cases, so they are scared to hand over power. But the Zambian people, through the ballot paper, will make sure that they hand over power.
President Lungu's backers say they are not worried. Their candidate plans to increase state control of the mines, as well as development projects built by his government and paid for by debt. Zambia has more than $12 billion of external debt, as well as an unknown amount of debt to China. But Lungu's governing party supporters believe the new roads, bridges, power stations, hospitals and airports are worth it.
All the people do in the opposition is to accuse us of corruption, to accuse us of stealing, to accuse us of things that they cannot even quantify. So the losing aspect is not in our vocabulary because we've tested the ground. We've heard what people are saying.
Corruption is another issue for voters. Western donors have suspended aid to Zambia, saying they are concerned about financial mismanagement. The country is relatively calm, but analysts predict this is going to be a hotly contested election. After Thursday's vote, if no candidate secures an outright majority in the first round, then a runoff has to take place. 5 years ago, President Edgar Lungu narrowly defeated his rival, Hakainde Hichilema, a result the opposition said was rigged, but they failed to overturn it in court.
In recent years, taking place in an atmosphere of high political tension. The president sent soldiers onto the streets after violent clashes between supporters of the ruling party and the opposition. President Edgar Lungu said this was to curb political violence, but others criticized it as an attempt at intimidation. The opposition says it has been targeted and harassed by the ruling party, using the police who are denying them from freely campaigning. The ruling party has denied being behind this, and the police say they're simply carrying out their duties, not taking sides. For many people, this election is about the economy. Zambia has a high foreign debt of around $12 billion United States dollars, and its citizens have seen a rising cost of living that has been worsened by the effects of COVID-19. Food prices today are about a third higher than they were a year ago. So for many people, it is about who can take the country out of its current woes. There are two top contenders for the presidency. One is President Edgar Lungu, the incumbent. The other is Hakainde Hichilema of the opposition United Party for National Development. President Edgar Lungu is riding on the new roads, schools and health facilities that have been built under his rule. He's also promising to bring down the cost of living, which he blames on COVID-19. In his 60th attempt at the presidency, Mr. Hichilema, a wealthy businessman and economist, is hoping luck will smile his way. He is promising to fix the economy and also restructure the country's debt, as well as deliver free education from primary school up to university. Many Zambians have registered to vote. Their numbers amount to more than 7 million. But with analysts saying it is too close to call, many Zambians are anxious about the outcome and whether or not the loser will accept the result.
I will be president until the winner from tomorrow's presidential election is sworn in. I am hopeful and prayerful that I will be the winner so that I hand over the instruments of power to myself.
Early this morning gripped the streets of Lusaka as the UPNG took over the reins of governance after 23 years of being in the opposition. Hakainde Hichilema, whom political players tormented of being a 5-time election loser, now becomes Zambia's 7th president. As early as 03 hours, minutes after the declaration of Mr. Hichilema as president-elect by Justice Esau Chulu, Lusaka residents swarmed the streets in celebration while expressing their expectations.
We expect that from the economy. Infrastructure they've done, now wait for the economy.
We know Bali will do the best for this country. Bali has seen untouched money, and money would never excite him.
Some youths could not resist the temptations of getting out of bed and walked kilometers to join the masses.
We're ecstatic we have put him into power and we're just happy.
We're expecting a change, obviously, for the good.
We want to be able to work hard and see the fruit of our work, to study and be engaged.
Church growth became impossible as residents of townships around the central business districts marched to State House.
When the youth decide, they decide. You don't take advantage of the youth. Zambian youth have spoken what they're supposed to speak about. You know what? Don't take people for granted.
The Great East Road was suddenly flooded with vehicles heading towards the Mulunguchi International Conference Center, the presidential toddling center where huge crowds converged in celebration.
It's almost 04 hours outside the Mulunguchi International Conference Center, and Lusaka residents have converged here to celebrate the exit